The Interstellar Academy of Sciences stood tall and proud on the artificial world of New Centauri. Its crystal towers reached toward the three suns that lit the sky in perfect, controlled intervals. Inside one of these towers, in a classroom filled with students from across the galaxy, Professor Neri prepared to give her first lecture of the semester. She adjusted her environmental suit, a necessity for her species when outside their carefully controlled home environments. The suit sparkled with a faint blue light, regulating temperature and atmospheric pressure to her exact needs. As she looked at her class, she saw beings from 30 different worlds, some floating in special tanks, others sitting in modified chairs, and a few hanging from the ceiling in their natural positions. Among them sat Hangil, the only human in the class. He wore a simple white uniform with the Academy's symbol on the chest. Unlike many of his classmates, he needed no special equipment to breathe or move in the standard classroom environment. This fact had always interested his fellow students, though some viewed it with suspicion. Today, Professor Neri began, her translator converting her musical language into standard galactic speech. We will discuss planetary environments and their influence on intelligent life. She waved her hand, and a holographic display filled the center of the room. As you can see, most advanced civilizations evolved in perfectly controlled conditions. The display showed various worlds, beautiful planets with stable atmospheres, perfectly circular orbits, and carefully balanced ecosystems. Each image came with data showing minimal temperature changes, gentle weather patterns, and constant, predictable seasons. These conditions, she continued, allowed for the steady development of technology and culture. She moved gracefully around the room, her environmental suit humming softly. When species don't have to waste energy fighting their environment, they can focus on advancing their civilization. Hangil listened carefully, taking notes on his tablet. He had heard similar ideas before, but something about Professor Neri's tone made him pay extra attention. The professor's next words confirmed his concerns. And then, she said, bringing up a new image, we have exceptions to this rule. Earth. The hologram showed Hangil's home planet, with its swirling storm systems, shifting continents, and tilted axis. Earth, Professor Neri said, her translator conveying a note of disbelief, is what we classify as an extremely hostile environment. Its temperature ranges from burning hot to freezing cold. It has dangerous storms, unpredictable weather, and constant geological activity. The fact that any intelligent life evolved there is. She paused, searching for the right word. Surprising. Several students turned to look at Hangil. He felt his face grow warm, but kept his expression calm. This wasn't the first time he'd heard his home described this way, but it was the first time a professor had been so direct about it. By all standard measures, Professor Neri continued, Earth should be classified as barely habitable. The amount of energy its species must expend just to survive is. She shook her head, making her environmental suit shimmer. It's remarkable that humans managed to develop any technology at all. Hangil raised his hand. He didn't want to cause trouble in his first class, but he couldn't let this description of Earth go unchallenged. Professor Neri nodded at him, her head tilting in the Centaurian expression of academic interest. Professor, Hangil said, keeping his voice steady, I have to respectfully disagree with your assessment. He stood up, drawing himself to his full height. Several of his classmates shifted in their various environmental containers, sensing the tension in the room. Earth's conditions aren't hostile. They're dynamic, Hangil continued. And those dynamics didn't hold us back. They pushed us forward. Professor Neri's environmental suit changed color slightly, showing her surprise. An interesting perspective, she said, her translator making her tone sound both diplomatic and skeptical. Perhaps you would like to explain how constant environmental threats contribute to advancement. Hangil looked around the classroom. His classmates watched with various expressions, some curious, others doubtful, a few seemingly concerned about potential conflict. In the back of the room, another student caught his eye. G1, a human exchange student from Busan, gave him an encouraging nod. I would be happy to explain, Hangil said. He walked to the front of the room, his footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet classroom. But first, I think we need to understand something important about Earth and its people. He reached for the hologram controls, his fingers moving across the interface with practiced ease. The image of Earth changed, zooming in to show various locations around the planet. What you see as hostile, he said, we see as home. What you call extreme, we call normal. And what you think of as barriers. He smiled slightly. Well, Professor, we see those as challenges, and humans have always been very good at meeting challenges. Professor Neri's environmental suit flickered with colors that suggested both doubt and curiosity. You make bold claims, Student Hangil, she said, but I prefer to base my conclusions on scientific evidence, not emotional attachments to one's homeworld. Of course, Professor, Hangil replied, his smile growing slightly wider. That's exactly what I was hoping you would say. Because I have evidence. A lot of it. And if you're willing, I'd like to share it with the class. The professor looked at him for a long moment, her suit cycling through several colors before settling on the blue shade that indicated academic acceptance. Very well, she said, present your evidence. But remember, this is a scientific institution. We deal in facts, not stories. Understood, Professor, Hangil said, his fingers already moving across the hologram controls. Let me show you some facts about Earth that might surprise you. As the hologram began to change, showing new images of Earth and its people, the other students leaned forward in their various environmental systems. Even Professor Neri moved closer, her suit humming with increased activity. No one in the classroom realized it yet, but this wasn't just going to be another ordinary lecture. This was going to be a lesson that would change how they all thought about what made a planet habitable, and about the species that called Earth home. Hangil stood at the front of the classroom, his fingers moving across the hologram controls with confidence. The image of Earth rotated slowly in the air, showing its swirling clouds and blue oceans. Professor Neri watched from her position near her desk, her environmental suit giving off a faint hum that filled the quiet room. Let's start with what you called Earth's most dangerous feature, Hangil said, zooming in on a particular region. Our planet's active geology. The hologram showed a series of volcanic islands rising from the ocean. Professor Neri's suit flashed with academic interest. Yes, she said, her translator making her voice clear and precise. Your planet's crust is unstable. It moves constantly, causing earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. These are serious threats to any civilization. Hangil nodded. That's one way to look at it. But let me show you another. He adjusted the display, revealing a complex network of underwater thermal vents. These same geological forces created the conditions that may have started life on Earth. They continue to provide energy and minerals that support complex ecosystems. From the back of the room, Jaiwan raised her hand. Professor, if I may add something. When Professor Neri nodded, Jaiwan continued. Our geological activity also created natural resources that helped our civilization develop. The movement of tectonic plates brought minerals to the surface that we needed for technological advancement. The professor's suit changed color slightly, showing consideration of this point. Interesting, she said. But surely there were safer ways to access these resources. The risks seem unnecessarily high. The risks taught us to adapt, Hangil replied. He changed the hologram again, showing various human cities. We learned to build structures that could withstand earthquakes. We developed warning systems and safety protocols. Each challenge made us more innovative. Several alien students shifted in their environmental containers, showing signs of interest. One of them, a gas-based being floating in a special tank, made a sound that the translator converted to words. But what about your extreme temperature variations? Surely those are inefficient for developing civilization. Hangil smiled. An excellent question. He expanded the Earth hologram, highlighting different climate zones. Earth's temperature variations forced us to become incredibly adaptable. We learned to live in almost every environment on our planet. The hologram showed scenes from around Earth, cities in desert regions with advanced cooling systems, settlements in Arctic zones with thermal management technology, and communities in tropical areas with innovative ventilation designs. Humans didn't just survive these conditions. Jai-1 added from her seat. We learned from them. Each environment taught us something new about engineering, about physics, about survival. Professor Neri moved closer to the hologram, her suit humming more intensely. But the energy cost, she argued. The resources required to maintain comfortable conditions in these extreme environments must be enormous. That's exactly the point, Han-Gil said. He brought up new data streams beside the images. Because we had to solve these problems, we developed more efficient technologies. Our need to adapt drove our innovation. He showed examples. Solar panels inspired by desert plants, wind turbines designed like bird wings, underwater structures that mimicked sea life. We turned our challenges into opportunities for advancement. Another student, a crystalline being that absorbed light for energy, chimed in through the translator. What about your storms? Your atmosphere seems constantly in chaos. Ah, our weather. Han-Gil's enthusiasm was clear in his voice. He changed the display to show Earth's atmospheric patterns. What looks like chaos is actually a complex system that we've learned to understand and even predict. The hologram filled with swirling weather patterns, showing how storms formed and moved across the planet. These storms taught us about fluid dynamics, about energy transfer, about the interaction between ocean and air. This knowledge helped us develop everything from better aircraft to more efficient energy systems. Professor Neri's suit displayed colors indicating both skepticism and growing interest. You make interesting points, she admitted. But surely you would agree that a more stable environment would have been more beneficial for development. Actually, Professor, Jai-1 spoke up again, standing to join Han-Gil in front of the room. We believe the opposite might be true. May I demonstrate? The professor nodded, her suit shifting to academic attention mode. Jai-1 adjusted the hologram to show a split screen. One side showing Earth's complex systems, the other showing one of the ideal worlds from earlier in the lecture. Look at the difference in biological diversity, she said. Earth's challenging conditions created countless opportunities for life to evolve and adapt. The display showed the rich variety of Earth's ecosystems compared to the more uniform environments of the other world. This diversity gave us more to learn from, more to understand, more to inspire us. Han-Gil picked up the thread. Every challenge our planet presented became a lesson, he said. When we needed to cross oceans, we learned about navigation and shipbuilding. When we wanted to understand storms, we developed meteorology. When earthquakes threatened our cities, we advanced our understanding of physics and engineering. The hologram now showed a timeline of human technological development, each advancement linked to an environmental challenge that had spurred it. But the cost, Professor Neri insisted, though her suit's colors showed her certainty wavering. The lives lost while developing these adaptations. Yes, Han-Gil acknowledged soberly. We learned some lessons the hard way. But each difficulty made us more determined to find solutions, to protect each other, to build safer and better systems. The classroom had grown very quiet. Even the students who needed constant environmental support systems had stilled their usual movement, focused entirely on the presentation. There's something else, Jai-1 added softly, something that might be hard to understand from the perspective of a world with perfect conditions. She adjusted the hologram one more time, showing scenes of human cooperation during natural disasters, of communities coming together to face challenges. Earth's conditions taught us more than just technology and science, she explained. They taught us to work together, to help each other, to share knowledge and resources, because sometimes survival depended on cooperation. Professor Neri was silent for a long moment, her environmental suit cycling through colors that suggested deep thought. Finally, she spoke. You have given me much to consider, she said, but I would like to see more specific evidence. Can you show us concrete examples of how these challenges directly led to technological advancement? Hangil and Ji-won exchanged a quick glance. This was exactly what they had hoped for, a chance to provide detailed proof of their claims. Of course, Professor, Hangil said, his fingers moving to adjust the hologram controls once more. Let's start with something simple, how our study of earthquakes led to developments in seismic technology that we now use to explore other worlds. The hologram shifted again, and as the new images began to appear, even the most skeptical students in the room leaned forward in their environmental containers. They all sensed that they were about to learn something unexpected about the species that had emerged from Earth's hostile environment. The classroom's lighting dimmed automatically as Hangil prepared to show his evidence. Professor Neri stood nearby, her environmental suit giving off a soft blue glow in the darkness. The other students watched quietly from their various environmental containers, all attention focused on the hologram display in the center of the room. Instead of just telling you about human achievements, Hangil said, "I would like to show you." He pressed a few controls, and the hologram transformed into a detailed three-dimensional scene. Let's start with what you consider one of Earth's most hostile environments, the deep ocean. The image showed the dark depths of Earth's oceans. Pressure readings appeared alongside the display, making several alien students' environmental systems pulse with surprise at the numbers. These pressures would crush most environmental suits, Professor Neri noted, her translator conveying a tone of concern. Exactly, Hangil agreed, which is why we had to innovate. The hologram changed to show the development of human deep-sea exploration vessels, from early diving bells to modern research submarines. Each design taught us something new about materials, about pressure resistance, about survival in extreme conditions. Ji-won stood up and walked to join him at the display controls. And what we learned didn't stay in the ocean, she added, adjusting the image to show space stations and planetary exploration vehicles. The same principles we developed for deep-sea exploration helped us design better spacecraft. The hologram split to show side-by-side comparisons. Deep-sea research stations next to space habitats, underwater repair techniques next to space maintenance procedures, marine survival systems next to life support systems for space travel. One of the alien students, a being composed mainly of crystalline structures, raised an appendage. But surely these were recent developments, after you had already established your civilization. Hangil smiled. Actually, humans have been exploring our oceans for thousands of years. The hologram showed early sailing vessels, fishing communities, and coastal civilizations. We had to master the sea to survive and grow. Every storm we weathered, every wave we rode, taught us something new about navigation, about weather patterns, about ship design. Professor Neri's suit shifted to a color indicating academic curiosity. "Show us more examples," she requested. "What about those temperature extremes we discussed?" Hangil nodded and changed the display again. Now it showed the Arctic regions of Earth. "This is one of the coldest inhabited places on our planet," he explained. "Temperatures regularly drop far below freezing. Most species would consider it impossible to live here." The hologram expanded to show human settlements in the Arctic, from ancient ice houses to modern research stations. But humans didn't just survive here, Hangil continued. We learned from it. Our study of how Arctic animals and plants adapt to extreme cold led to breakthroughs in insulation technology, in energy conservation, in weather prediction. Ji-won took over the controls, switching the view to Earth's deserts. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have some of the hottest places on Earth, places where water is scarce and temperatures soar. The display showed various desert adaptation technologies, solar power systems, water conservation methods, cooling systems based on natural airflow. Every harsh environment pushed us to innovate, she explained. We couldn't just avoid these places. They were part of our world. So we learned to thrive in them. A student floating in a liquid-filled container made a sound that the translator converted to words. But the energy cost of maintaining comfortable conditions in these extremes must be enormous. That's where human ingenuity comes in, Hangill replied. He adjusted the hologram to show various energy-efficient designs inspired by nature. We learned from the plants and animals that already lived in these environments. We studied how they conserved energy, how they managed heat and cold, how they found and stored water. The display showed modern buildings with designs inspired by termite mounds for natural cooling, water collection systems based on desert beetle shells, and heat management materials modeled after polar bear fur. Professor Neri moved closer to the hologram, her suit humming with increased activity. "These are impressive adaptations," she admitted. "But what about your geological instability? Surely that has only caused destruction." "Let me show you something interesting about that," Hangill said. The hologram changed to show a city in Japan. "This is one of the most earthquake-prone regions on Earth. But look at these buildings." The display zoomed in to show skyscrapers with special foundations and flexible structures. "We learned to build structures that can bend without breaking," he explained. "We developed early warning systems that can detect earthquakes before they strike. We created building codes and safety protocols that save countless lives." Jaiwan added to his explanation, bringing up new data streams. "And these innovations didn't just help us with earthquakes. The same principles we developed for earthquake-resistant buildings now help us design better spacecraft, more durable bridges, and safer underwater structures." The hologram now filled with examples of human innovation born from necessity: weather prediction systems, disaster response protocols, renewable energy technologies, and advanced materials developed to withstand extreme conditions. But perhaps the most important thing we learned from Earth's challenges wasn't technological at all, Hangill said softly. The hologram changed one final time, showing scenes of human cooperation during natural disasters. People forming rescue teams, communities rebuilding together, nations sending aid to their neighbors. "Our harsh environment taught us that we're stronger together," he explained. "It showed us that survival often depends on cooperation, on sharing knowledge, on helping each other." These lessons shaped not just our technology, but our entire civilization. Professor Neri stood silently for a long moment, her environmental suit cycling through colors that suggested deep thought. Around the room, other students watched the displays with new understanding in their various sensory organs. "You have given us much to consider," the professor finally said. Her translator conveyed a tone of genuine respect. "But I have one final question. If your species has learned to adapt so well to these conditions, why do you still seek to explore other worlds? Why join the Interstellar Academy?" Hangill and G1 exchanged glances. This was the question they had been waiting for. The perfect opportunity to make their final point about human nature and the drive to explore and understand. "Professor," Hangill began, his voice filled with quiet conviction, "that's actually the most important lesson Earth taught us." He reached for the hologram controls one last time, ready to show them something that would change their understanding not just of Earth, but of humanity itself. Hangill's fingers moved across the hologram controls one last time. The classroom fell completely silent as the display transformed into a vast starfield. Professor Neri's environmental suit glowed softly in the darkness as she watched with the rest of the class. "You asked why we explore," Hangill said quietly. "The answer begins with our earliest ancestors." The hologram showed early humans looking up at the night sky. "Even when we were struggling to survive Earth's harsh conditions, we never stopped looking up at the stars. We never stopped wondering what was out there." Jaiwan stepped forward, adding her own input to the display. The image changed to show the progression of human space exploration. The first rockets, the moon landings, the Mars colonies, and finally, the first faster-than-light ships. "Each step we took into space used lessons we learned from Earth," she explained. "Our deep-sea exploration taught us about surviving in hostile environments. Our experience with extreme temperatures helped us design better spacecraft. Our earthquake-resistant buildings helped us create stronger space stations. Professor Neri moved closer to the display, her suit changing colors in a pattern that suggested deep interest. "But why take such risks?" she asked. "Your species had already mastered survival on Earth. Why face the dangers of space?" Hangil smiled. "Because that's what Earth taught us to do," he said. "Every challenge we faced made us stronger, more curious, more determined to understand and explore." He adjusted the display to show various human achievements throughout history. "We learned that obstacles aren't barriers. They're opportunities to learn and grow." The hologram now showed scenes from the Interstellar Academy itself. Humans working alongside alien species, sharing knowledge, learning from each other. "That's why we're here," Hangil continued. "Not because we want to escape Earth's conditions, but because they prepared us for this moment, for reaching out to the stars and meeting new civilizations." One of the alien students, a being of pure energy contained in a special field, spoke through the translator. "But surely your species would prefer to live in more controlled conditions now that you have the technology." Jai-1 shook her head. "We've learned that comfort isn't always the best teacher," she said. "Challenge drives innovation. Difficulty inspires creativity. The unknown encourages exploration." The hologram changed again, showing Earth from orbit. Its swirling clouds, blue oceans, and green continents looked beautiful and dynamic. "Our planet isn't hostile," Hangil said firmly. "It's a teacher. Every earthquake taught us about resilience. Every storm showed us the power of adaptation. Every harsh environment helped us understand the importance of working together." Professor Neri's suit displayed colors that none of the students had seen before, a combination that suggested a profound shift in understanding. "You see your planet's challenges as gifts," she said slowly, "as learning opportunities." "Yes," Hangil agreed. "But more than that, Earth taught us something crucial about life itself." He expanded the hologram to show various ecosystems on Earth, each adapting and thriving in its own way. Life doesn't need perfect conditions to flourish. Sometimes it's the imperfections that make us stronger. Jai-1 added, "And that's why we believe studying different environments, different species, different ways of living is so important. Each one has something to teach us." The professor stood quietly for a moment, considering everything she had heard and seen. Finally, her suit shifted to a color that indicated a formal academic response. "Students Hangil and G1," she said, her translator making her voice clear and precise. "You have presented a compelling case for reconsidering our definition of hostile environments." She moved to her desk and accessed her teaching interface. "I am officially modifying this course's curriculum," she announced. "We will no longer classify planets as hostile or ideal based solely on their similarity to Centaurian standards. Instead, we will study how different conditions can foster different types of adaptation and advancement." The alien students showed various signs of surprise and interest through their environmental systems. The crystalline being's facets sparkled with academic excitement. The energy being's containment field pulsed with curiosity. "Furthermore," Professor Neri continued, "I would like to formally apologize for my earlier dismissal of Earth's conditions. It is clear that I allowed my own environmental preferences to bias my scientific judgment." Hangil bowed slightly in acknowledgement. "Thank you, Professor, but there's no need for apology. Learning to see things from new perspectives is what science is all about, isn't it?" The professor's suit displayed colors of agreement. "Indeed, and I believe your presentation has given us all something important to consider about the nature of advancement and civilization." She turned to address the entire class. "Your assignment for next week will be to research how your own species' home environment influenced your development. I want you to think carefully about what you learned from your world's challenges, not just its comforts." As the other students began discussing the assignment with excitement, Professor Neri approached Hangil and G1. "There is one more thing," she said. "Would you be willing to help develop a new section for this course? One that specifically studies how environmental challenges can drive technological and social advancement?" Hangil and Jiwon looked at each other, then nodded. "We would be honored," Jiwon said. "After all, sharing knowledge and working together is one of the most important lessons Earth taught us." The professor's suit displayed colors of academic satisfaction. "Then perhaps Earth's most valuable contribution to galactic science isn't just the technology you developed, but the perspective you gained from your challenges." As the class ended and the students began to leave in their various environmental systems, Hangil looked one last time at the hologram of Earth still rotating slowly in the center of the room. He thought about all the generations of humans who had looked up at the stars and dreamed of reaching them, who had faced Earth's challenges and turned them into opportunities, who had never stopped exploring and learning. "You know," he said quietly to Jiwon, "maybe that's the real reason we joined the Interstellar Academy. Not just to learn about other worlds, but to share what our world taught us, that the greatest discoveries often come from the most unexpected places." Jiwon nodded, watching the other students leave. Already, she could hear them discussing their own planet's challenges with new interest and understanding. "I think," she said with a smile, "this is just the beginning of a much bigger conversation." Professor Neri, overhearing their exchange, made a final note in her academic records. Her suit displayed one last color combination, one that her species reserved for moments of profound scientific breakthrough. Perhaps, she realized, she had learned the most important lesson of all, that true understanding often requires seeing the universe through someone else's eyes.